It's time for Gun and Saddle, a United Country M. Edwards Realty and Land weekly broadcast where we talk about anything and everything related to our God-fearing country lifestyles and the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to make them possible. Join Monty Edwards and Pierce Lancaster as they take a deeper look at the land we all love and the people that call it home. This is Gun and Saddle.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Gun and Saddle. I'm Pierce Lancaster. That's Monty Edwards. Y'all are getting a special treat this week. We got 2 episodes that we aired this week. So this one's actually live. So if y'all want to interact with us, feel free to leave comments on Facebook. And you can leave comments on YouTube too. Is that right?
Yeah, YouTube. And also, I believe, I don't know how many people we got that are listening on LinkedIn, but they can also do that there as well. So and I'll be looking down here. You'll see me looking down some, but I'll check in the comment screens and be able to see what you're putting in there on the live feeds. Yeah, may take a little while before we start getting a lot of those, but we wanted people to understand this is where you can interact if you're watching it live. So
it's been a pretty good week for us, pretty eventful week.
We've had a busy week. Pierce and I had a crash course in learning how to do some things out in 106-degree weather. So that made me value air conditioning. But no, we're excited about this upcoming month. We've got a lot of things that we're going to be doing that are going to be exciting. We're going to be bringing folks in. Today we're going to be fortunate to have with us Ricky Yantis. Ricky's real active in the Farm Bureau and also is a cotton farmer, and he farms some other commodities as well, but that's probably his main crop that he farms in this area. We're going to have him in just a minute. He's going to sit in. We're going to talk to him about the local growing conditions. It's been something to talk about for sure. But he's going to come in. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that we've got facing us, just in agriculture, which I can't really remember a time in my life when there wasn't challenges in agriculture.
Yeah.
But these are definitely a different set that we're looking at right now. So anyway, we don't really have a whole lot else. We wanted to tee this thing up. Pierce, you got anything else you want to bring in before we go to break and then bring in Ricky?
I got nothing.
All right. Well, listen, kind of stall for a second while I go to our first commercial, and then we'll be right back. And I mean, really keep stalling. Okay. Okay, never mind.
Keep stalling.
Well, let's just bring Ricky in. Why don't you, Ricky, just start? So you gotta love live
musical
video.
chairs.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ricky. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning, Monty. How are you?
Morning, yeah. That's the thing about going live. If you screw up, you got to keep going. So
that's right.
We have technology. But no, Ricky, we're glad you could join us today. Thanks for being a part. And I didn't get a chance to tell you where the camera is, but you probably saw us looking over there a while ago. Thanks for being here. I've known Ricky most of my life, and Ricky's a real active person in our community, our local community and county. And like I said, I mentioned you've been on the Farm Bureau board for a long time. How long have you been serving with Farm Bureau?
Well, I've been on the board since 82.
82, okay.
And I'm currently serving as president of the Lamb County Farm Bureau, and I'm also on the state cotton advisory. I actually leave Sunday for a meeting for that.
Well, I know me and you had some discussion leading up to this interview when we were talking, and this year, just if you could sum up this year in a sentence, how would you be able to do that?
No, it's that. I think that's hard this year. You mentioned every year has challenges, but I don't know if I remember a year that we had all the challenges on the same year. I asked a friend of mine. I said, "Can I put drought, excessive moisture, cold weather, high winds, and hail and hard rain on one insurance claim?" It's been kind of a challenging year, and it's been hard. It's been mentally tough on all of us guys.
Yeah, that's one of the things, and I know another one of our mutual friends. He talks about this period of time from the time that you get ready to start planting, but when that seed goes in the ground to the time that you harvest. Of course, this year there's going to be a lot of seed that went in the ground that it's not going to get harvested because of conditions. But that time period where it's game time, you just really, unless you've lived in this lifestyle, you don't really have an appreciation for what that means, when that goes in. Because everything that's out there, all these external factors that you just mentioned, all affect what's going on. So
yeah, should be one of the most enjoyable times of a farmer's life. It is one of the most stressful to get your seed in the ground and get them up and going, and with our declining water table and things like that, we can't correct things like we used to could. We used to could work our way out of a lot of things, but anymore today, and especially this year, it's been a real challenge.
Well, and I, you bring that up, and we were on the phone talking the other day, and one of the things that this focus of this podcast is the people that live here, or the land we all love, and the people that live in it. And one of the things that it's interesting. It's interesting to see how people are adapting to changing conditions, because I think something that we don't even realize is overall just dealing with these challenges on our resources. It's unique to here in some regards, but it's really not. I mean, in other places they deal with other challenges with them. Sometimes it's in other parts of the country, it may be where they have excess of these resources and they can't get away from them. I can remember talking to guys in the Midwest where they didn't know what dry land was because they called it rain fed.
Yeah. Out here, rain fed doesn't do very well. I was talking to a young man that grew up in this area, and many years ago, him and I had a conversation about farming. I said, you just need to go where the water is, and he's in El Campo now.
Yeah.
And he said, we stay too wet most of the time.
Yeah. Well, and I talked to a guy a few years ago that left from here, moved into Missouri during 2011-12 during the drought. He was a cattle guy. And he I don't know if he's listening today. I'm not going to name names, but he was just out there, and he said, got out there, and he said, I was dealing with cattle in belly deep in mud. So I guess the point I'm getting to that is there's challenges in all of it. The other part, though, that I was talking to Ricky about the other day, and I think Farm Bureau's involved in a lot of this because they help share information. They help really educate the public, but also bring tools and education to the farmers, of things. But there are some young guys in farming right now that it's truly amazing some of the practices they're using, some of the planting patterns that they're using, technology. I mean, I know you do some of that too. Several years ago here, we saw the guys start to do some things that people thought were counterintuitive, putting skip row under pivots.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you do have to adapt as you go along, and there is lots of philosophies and lots of theories, and I'll be the first to admit what works for one guy may not work for the next guy, and so you kind of got to have to find what fits you. But I think you've seen a big switch over to less tillage. There again though, but when you don't get any moisture or rain to help you all winter, that's a challenge. And so everything offers its own challenge. There's some guys that it's true, that if you've got a cover crop, it's using up moisture, but it's also this is kind of crazy but it also conserves moisture. So it's a challenge as a young man starting and to figure out what works best for you and your conditions, because everybody's conditions are a little different.
Well, and one thing I see, I'm out and about in a lot of places, a lot of different areas, and I see a mix of different things people are trying, and then these guys will come together, and you'll see guys that are doing things in different parts. And I'm not talking about huge areas. We talk about going north to Sandhills here or south or whatever, but you'll see a lot of guys like now. I see a lot of guys using cool season, warm season crops in their rotation, where guys used to a lot of them like to do just summer season crops. And I mean, it's just reality now. We're doing some things. The cover crops, you mentioned that. Seeing some guys taking cover and using their cover, but trying to turn it into a cash crop and then turn around and go back into it. But then you get into tight timing windows and some things that me and you were talking the other day about that. There's this one part of the ag sector that we see here that's making it work one way because they're kind of doing an old conventional, modern, small scale method that can kind of work, but there's a limit to what you can do with that. And then you got this other side where you're wanting to take advantage of yield technology, use the tools that you have, but if you do that, you have to have an economy of scale there.
It comes with a price. My dad farmed 5 farms, and made a living for the family, and now we have a lot more to that because you have to afford these tractors and other machinery but like back to your point about the cover crops, and east and south of Lubbock, a lot of them are already into this pattern of just doing half and putting wheat or some harvestable crop on one half, concentrate on the other half, and flip their water back and forth, or even on their dry land. And there again, boy, that cuts your acres in half too.
It does. It does.
And you if you've got all these land payments and tractor payments and all that, all of a sudden you've cut your land. But I do know a lot of them feel like they're making just as much.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You can see it in the yield, and you're cutting your acres down that you're spending money on.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the things you bring up too, and this is something that I think's been interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch moving forward. Talking to people out in the industry and the markets. I mean, I've heard some guys saying in the last few days. I mean, cash in some of these markets is more bullish than the actual trade markets right now, which is actually a good fundamental sign. When you see that, that means the markets could be fairly strong. So, I think one of the things that we may start to realize, I don't think we thought this a few years ago, but I'm starting to think that could come into play, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. But I really do think that people are in as bad as I hate it. I think people that live in any country, especially even the United States, are going to have to pay more for food, pay more for their grocery bill, because it's just costing more to produce it now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think if you noticed last night, you mentioned Farm Bureau a while ago. President Biden signed a shipping clause thing into effect that's supposed to help lower shipping costs and for agriculture and other products, because right now it's costing so much to ship. And anyway, I just saw it on the news last night, so I really haven't read it, but it's supposed to help us. And if you'll notice, if you do, all the president of AFBF was standing on his left shoulder when he signed it, and he's actually the one that gave the press release afterwards.
Right.
But anyway, I think as we go along and it costs us more to produce, you will see that. But I think one thing that the general public doesn't realize is how little the producer actually gets of that loaf of bread when you buy that loaf of bread.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pennies what the producer actually gets. It's all in the processing and the shipping and the handling and the distribution of that is where all the money goes. It's not into the producer's pocket. But the markets are good and strong right now. We're hoping for good prices. Unfortunately, in the Lamb County area, this area around here, particularly around Sudan, is going to be struggling to have a lot of volume.
Yeah, and you and I've known this too. We saw this last year, and you're always going to notice when I'm in this. Being in the business, I used to be in the crop insurance business. I'm in the real estate business now, but I think at every corner when you see something go one direction, you turn around and you'll see some kind of opportunity that could still pop up. And I think we're all watching the clock. We know, the rain right now could go miles, and getting into a different pattern. If we could see that weather pattern shift like we did last year, because we got a lot of acres right here that could be quickly planted into some type of forage or some type of other thing that would help us get ready for winter, even if it wasn't about harvesting a crop, just getting the soil in better conditions.
Ground cover.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about while we were here too, because I know you're a cotton farmer, and I know that this year, when we get in these springs where we miss our seasonal rains, you guys, you don't like to see your ground blow any more than anybody else, and it impacts everybody in the area when that's going on. Everybody lives in these farm communities, but growing up around here, I've watched, and I know one of the focuses that farmers have nowadays, which I think this is a misconception to the general public, is they are trying to do everything they can to keep that from happening, within the scope of what is possible with the conditions that we have. So
obviously this year there's been 2 rules of thumb. One rule of thumb is if it ain't blowing, don't touch it.
Yeah.
And number 2, if you ain't got something blowing, you're not farming a whole lot.
Well, that's true. Something else you mentioned also, I was going to go back to this. I didn't want to forget it. You mentioned that, and I was over in Floyd County last fall and then in the spring, and I saw just what you're talking about, where the guys are planting wheat and they're using that and letting it go, and then it's the next year it's their cover crop instead of coming into it right out of the wheat crop. And
right.
And that's working pretty effectively, honestly. And like you said, talking to some of those guys, even from a cost management standpoint, and then overall yield profitability standpoint, because they're pretty profitable with what they're doing. I think this is showing us too, getting those acre units back. Also, another deal that I've seen that's been pretty important to people is if you've got units where you can tie labor or quarters or labors. I talk labors. I'm from Lamb County, you can tell. But you've got these quarter sections. Half sections are pretty valuable because you can share water. In some cases, even sections where guys are putting the water in one pivot so they can get that water volume up. Because when you get that water volume up, it does more good on these days where our humidity's low. And all those things all point towards trying to be a better manager of the resource.
It does, but unfortunately, it's just taking more and more wells to get you to that point.
Yeah, it does. But, here's the other part of it, and this is the reality of it. This part of the country, just like all these other ag regions, are the ones that produce the food and fiber. So I think that's the point we miss sometimes. If these things move and they interact and live in the same environment with each other, that's the hard part for us to see because that's the unknown. But what you got, that's where I was going back to earlier. Food and these things are going to cost what it takes to produce them. And I think sometimes, like you said, I remember 15 years ago being in a room and having somebody go through a deal. And you've heard this same thing, I'm sure, but talking about a box of Wheaties, how much the farmer got out of the box of Wheaties. And what was really interesting was the person who had their picture on the box of Wheaties got about 3 or 4 times more than the farmer that produced the Wheaties. Yeah, I actually think it was higher than that. Yeah. But the marketing and all those things that go into selling a product. And that's one of the things about Farm Bureau that I think that I appreciate from the advocacy side, because they're out there, they spend some time. Let's talk for a minute about what y'all do with talking to the youth. Y'all have these ag days that y'all do.
We feel like one of the most important things we do in Farm Bureau is educate. Mm-hmm. Educate things about what we just talked about the price on that. One of the big things that education-wise lately has been EPA rules. Some of the things that affect our ability to spray chemicals, where to spray chemicals, and most importantly, we want to be as transparent as possible about what we are doing. We eat the same products and wear the same products that we produce, so we're not going to do anything to harm anything. And I think that's a misconception that's really out there in the world. And then as far as kids, we have camps. There's camps going on right now. You can go online and register, I think, for some that are actually in Lubbock at the LCU campus this year. But there's several opportunities for youth to go and learn, and not only learn about agriculture, but they learn about enterprise, entrepreneuring, the Constitution, and things like that. And we have a very good program to bring up our youth, as well as we have Ag in the Classroom lesson plans for teachers K through 12. And anyway, there's a lot of good opportunities. We've just had a teacher down at the science deal in Waco last week from Olton. She was down there, and there's a lot of opportunities for teachers, for youth, and just the general public to learn about some of the questions you have about agriculture and what goes on and why. And anyway, that's one thing I like about Farm Bureau is our advocacy.
Well, and that was one thing, I guess, for years. I was an independent insurance agent, so when I was dealing with Farm Bureau for a long time, I was just knew them from the insurance standpoint. And then as some of the stuff we worked on over the years, but being involved in the ag advocacy side of it, I got to see a whole different side of Farm Bureau. Got to spend some time for a few years with a guy named Dewey Huckel. Yeah. He spent his whole life, or a big part of his life, working in Farm Bureau, or working for him as a farmer. But Ricky, I appreciate the fact that you came on today. I told Pierce, I said, we're going to talk to Ricky today, and we're going to talk about the farming situation. And I know it's right now we're in the heat of it. We don't really know how it's going to all shake out. I appreciate you coming on and visiting with folks about it.
No problem. Enjoyed it. And, y'all just keep in mind, pray for your farmers, because it's a very high stress level right now. Yeah. And everybody's got a lot of stress on what to do. I've never been in this situation where people ask me, so what should I do? And I really don't know. I can't answer that. When's it going to rain? When's it? is it going to stay like this the rest of the year? Or, I can't answer those questions.
Well, I know we talk about this a lot in different contexts, but it's hard to see it as a blessing, but it really truly is a blessing to be in an industry where you're constantly reminded that the good Lord has control. That we've got a role and we've got a thing that we've got to do, and these things you're talking about are trying to make sure you're doing that part right. But then also kind of being humble to understand that I do my part, but God's got to make it rain.
It's still in His control.
Amen. But that's a good thing, because that we can count on the fact that He's not going to screw it up.
Well, so, we'd have it all messed up.
Yeah, we would. So, well, listen, we're going to try to go to a commercial right quick, and then Pierce is going to come back. We're going to go out. But Ricky, I really do appreciate you joining us, and I hope this can be one of many deals we do like this. Maybe we can have you back here sometime pretty soon, and hopefully we'll be back at the end of the year to talk about how this thing turned around on a dime, and it was the best bumper second crop you've ever had in your life. So.
The calendar's working.
Well, thanks for joining us.
The time has come to sell, but who can you trust to help? This isn't just dirt. It's the place your children took their first deer.
Honey, that's a giant.
The value of the timber is the old wooden stand you just can't bring yourself to tear down. The roads may be gravel, but they access countless memories. This is more than lines on a map. It's your small piece of heaven.
Heck yeah.
This is your property, and that's why we want to be your agent. Realty United Country. Turn your passion into possibilities.
All right, so guys, we really do appreciate you joining us today. As we mentioned earlier, we're going to have a lot of these coming up. We're going to hopefully have, the focus of this is in the farm and ranch areas, our Western culture, the area where we live. If you got an idea for a suggestion for a show, somebody you'd like to see us bring on an interview, man, we'd love to hear that. I know Pierce and we're not forgetting either. We're getting geared up for a fall hunting season, and I will tell you this. I know it's kind of been a weird year because we've been very dry this spring, but in a lot of places, because we had a lot of cover going into the winter, and we still had some through the winter, I'm still seeing a lot of upland game. I'm seeing a lot of quail, lots of quail, more quail than I have seen in a long, long time. And
that's a trend that seems to be happening around a lot of places. Talking about where I'm from in North Texas, I never saw a quail ever. Yeah. And last couple times I've been home, there'll be a covey or two you'll see, and so across the state, I think quail and up here pheasant making a comeback. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, and one of the things that we may try to work on, I know a couple of years ago I was able to sit down with some of the guys at the NRCS and then some of the groups that work on that. I believe it's is it Pheasants Unlimited maybe, or
Pheasants Forever.
Pheasants Forever, and is it Quail? It's Quail. Quail's got an organization too. I'm on a blank right now, but I know one of the guys that's very involved in it. But what I was going to say is we need to bring those guys on because they can talk to you. There's a lot of ways that farmers can implement practices where farmers and ranchers where they can actually get assistance with that, but it actually improves habitat on their buffer areas around their farms. Just like we're talking about standing cover in the winter, some things that can really help the wildlife.
And nesting stuff like that too, and that's as a guy that really likes waterfowl, that's a big thing, and waterfowl conservation, making sure there's nesting sites for ducks, because they don't nest in trees, they nest on the ground. And so working with farmers and stuff, especially in the Midwest, working on ways to protect nests without running them over with the tractors and stuff like that.
Well, we had a place listed this last year, and it had a water enclosure, a water entrapment device, and it was really cool. I was amazed how long that thing could keep water, because we tested it pretty good this last year, and actually one of the owners asked me to go out and if I could when I was out there with the ranger and take some water to put in it, but it had been several weeks since it had any rain, and that thing still had a lot of water in it. When I told him, he said, well, these things are pretty cool, the technology, and it's really, I say technology, that's the wrong word, because this is simple stuff.
Yeah,
but it's the practices that people can implement. It's not taking a lot, but it makes a huge difference on the impact on what you can have with the birds and in the hunting. And, you know, at one time or another, we want to hopefully this year talk about how, you know, as we're going through these things and we're looking, and, you know, Ricky touched on it while he's here. I mean, things are changing. We're in a changing landscape. I think these legs of revenue that maybe we've overlooked in the past, hunting revenue, that's potential to bring that in on your farm. You know, also just the resellability of a farm, if it's been took care of in a way for the natural resource, brings a whole different buyer to the table, potentially. I think we're going to see partnerships between these guys that want to have a place to leave town, to take their families and go hunt, and the guys that are out working the land. Because I can see partnerships coming up where, you know, Ricky mentioned land prices for some guys that are farming and buying equipment. Sometimes you've got investors. We've had a lot of guys that are coming in wanting to own land in the ag sector. I mean, really, there's still lots of guys coming in that are wanting to buy land. And some of them are guys that grew up on the farm and they're working in a job. You know, I know Ricky's got a son that's grown up on the farm, but he's got a job and doing things. And guys like that sometimes want to own land. You know, they come back. And so, you know, the number one thing that you realize when you're dealing with someone knowing they've been off doing something else, they're going to want you to help answer these questions. Okay, how am I going to pay for this? Well, you've got to have these different ways and things that come into play. The other thing, though, that's a real positive when we look at land is that overall, if you just follow land through time, land is one of the greatest hedges against inflation that you can put your money in. I mean, over time, it has been able to kind of roll with the punches, but I've watched this here, even watching our dry land prices. We call it dry land here, but you know, it's kind of been like watching a real standard commodity or something like gold or something, you know, it just is a kind of a steady path that it follows a trajectory on price. So lots of things to talk about this year. We're just getting started. We're glad that y'all joined us. Pierce, I want you to bring in some of your folks from down in the Bowie area. I want us to talk a little bit, educate some of these guys about duck hunting.
Well, I'm the guy for that. So I mean.
Yeah, I know. I want you to bring some stories in, though. I want to get some guys that have duck hunted with me.
Oh, man. I don't know if we could share some of those.
Well, listen, we enjoy y'all being here. Thanks for being a part of this, and we'll be back next week on another episode of Gun and Saddle.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for watching Gun and Saddle, a United Country M. Edwards Realty and Land weekly broadcast. Have an idea for a future episode, comments, or suggestions? Email us at comments@gunandsaddle.com. Remember to subscribe or follow us today. Join us again next week for a deeper look at the land we all love and the people that call it home. This is Gun and Saddle.
For all the reasons we at Realty United Country Hunting Properties can list to buy your own hunting and recreational property, these have to be at the top. Contact your local Realty Land Pro and turn your passion into possibilities.